I'm Thierry Heles. This is The Next Leap. Towards the end of last year, the University of Arts London secured a grant from Research England to lead a consortium of 6 universities that would develop a shared tech transfer office focused on creative and social sciences. That pilot project, dubbed Shared Technology Transfer to Accelerate the Growth of Self-Funded Spinouts, or STAGE, has now come to a close, so it's the perfect time to reflect on what's gone well and what needs to happen next. Gavin Clark, Director of Enterprise and Commercialisation at the University of the Arts London, and Mark Mann, a consultant who helped bring the consortium together, join me to explain why they used a model from the University of Birmingham to build their project, how that approach works, and what the pitfalls are of wrangling 6 universities to say yes to an external tech transfer office run by specialists from Kindling Ventures. We also explore the importance of capturing data, which will be made public in the coming weeks and months, how the project has drawn international attention, and even what it's all meant on a more personal level. Gavin, Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Great to be here.
We will be talking about your joint TTO project today, which I think is a very, very interesting initiative. And to start with, let's set the scene a bit. Can you tell me about the origins of STAGE?
Well, from my perspective, Terry, it began with the University of Arts London appointing me as its inaugural director and sole employee of the Technology Transfer Office. So, in a sense, University of Arts London was a very late starter to technology transfer, but that proved to be ideal for this project. Of course, recent years have been times of austerity for universities, so there's not a lot of money around to form a new tech transfer office. So when the Research England grant was announced to form a shared technology transfer office with government funding, it really matched the circumstances that I found myself in as the inaugural director and sole employee. I mean, I saw an opportunity to apply for the grant as part of a consortium and bring the skills of commercialisation to projects with experience and at low cost. And the first person I reached out to was Mark, because these grants, they're launched with very little notice. So you've got about 2 months, I think it is, to put in a bid. So I knew that Mark knew this field nationally far better than me. So I reached out to Mark and said, hey, what do you think about doing one of these bids?
Yeah, that's it. And that's what I said. It's a good idea because I'm speaking to other universities who are in very similar situation and looking to do very similar things. And I just done some work with Lancaster University, and they were finding that although they were able to get disclosures of new potential projects, that projects were getting stuck at a particular stage, and they wanted to know why and what it was that they could do in order to fix that. On top of that, I've been working with other universities, or they've been in contact with the universities and looking for ways in which we could all work together. Warwick was one. And I was already doing some work at the University of the West of England, where I was doing consultations with their academics who had got some great ideas and great innovations, and again was sort of wondering what their next stages were going to be, what they needed to do. And actually, they needed some infrastructure to connect it all together. So we decided to put a bid together and design what has now become a shared knowledge transfer office, which got 14 projects in it.
Wow.
Yeah, and split across the universities with wonderful support from Birmingham University as well, who've set up their own operating division as well, which operates on similar principles. And we are just coming to the end of the project now.
Which is a really good time to look back on it and take some lessons, which we'll get to in a moment as well. Was the problem that you're trying to solve, was that purely a resource problem then, or were there other things that we were trying to tackle with this joint project?
It's a resource problem for most universities, I mean, especially mine, with me as the sole employee. But in particular, there's an issue with the point, how and when you spin out an arts and humanities venture. So unlike a STEM proposition that raises venture capital, well, you form a business, you raise the venture capital and you launch away and you do the work and then you hope to sell the business. With an arts and a humanities business, they grow more organically, as Mark pointed out, much like ordinary businesses outside of universities. So for many of our founding academics, there's no obvious point of spin out. There's a critical mass of forming their own venture that they might never get to without assistance. And that assistance is as simple as helping them trade efficiently, sell services to customers. But that's extremely difficult to do with university systems. They're not set up for doing that. So a critical problem for the point of Spinout is to enable those ventures to test their markets by trading. So this was the problem that Birmingham have solved. They have a subsidiary company through which emerging ventures can trade. And we at University of Arts London were looking at doing the same. But the shared TTO comes along and now forms an external business unit that can do this for all the consortium parties, so with the benefit of a critical mass. So the problem we're solving is not just resourcing, it's the specialist expertise for this types of venture.
Yeah.
And very importantly, the mechanism to allow them to easily trade without the founders immediately needing to incorporate their own business.
This is basically just doing tech transfer, but the opposite way around. Because normally what you would do is you would protect everything, hide it away from everyone as much as possible, build your product in a garage, hide it away from anyone, sell it confidentially to some investors, and you might go through the entire lifetime of a spin-out company and not sell a single product. It exits to a big technology giant or to a group of investors who take it on and then start selling stuff. So actually selling stuff from the very beginning is just not what the university systems are set up to do.
Yeah. That's where the operating divisions model comes in from the University of Birmingham that you've both touched on.
An important point that Mark made earlier, he called it a knowledge transfer office. So knowledge transfer rather than technology transfer. And that's very appropriate because we're not dealing with STEM projects. There's generally not a lot of technology. They're more consultancies, arts and humanities ventures. So a knowledge transfer office is a nice way of thinking about it. So if you like, both the expertise and the mechanisms for Spinner are different, and we could call that a knowledge transfer office. So that's the unique creation.
What made you choose these specific university partners then? I'm assuming Birmingham came in because they had the operating divisions model that you could use. Lancaster, you mentioned already, Mark. What is it about these partners that you have that makes them great for this consortium?
Let's do Birmingham first. Birmingham wanted to join because they wanted to be able to tap into the network of specialists that we've been bringing together. Though they have their own operating division, they've got a few projects in there. Again, even with a university the size of Birmingham, their network of specialists in particular sectors isn't quite what they wanted to do. And so they didn't have people who were specialists in particular sectors. And so they said, we'll show you how we've done it so far. And then if we could just tap into your network of experts, that's good enough for us. Whereas the other partners essentially had projects at various stages. I think the shared TTO is definitely designed for, call it that pre-incorporation phase where, okay, you've done your market validation, you know that you've got something that you want to provide to someone, you sort of know what it's going to look like, and then you need to test it with a customer. All of them had the problem, right, okay, so what do we do next? And that's where everyone was getting stuck. And so the mechanism is essentially to license the IP into the separate entity, shared KTO, and that essentially takes all the contracting, all the questions about how do we do this within the university out of the university's hands. The university is still completely in control of what's going on. They can look over our shoulders and what we're trying to do. But whereas it takes maybe 3 to 6 months to hire somebody in the university setting, I can hire somebody tomorrow morning if I wanted to and plumb them into a project if they had the right skills. And so it vastly speeds up the mechanism by which you can actually get a trial service in front of a customer, takes the risk away from the university. And when the project finishes, then we can decide what to do with it. Do we need to go again? Should we improve it and try again? In which case, leave it where it is, do it again, see how it goes. Any IP that's developed as a consequence of it, we store it, we put in a bucket. And then at the end, we then hand it back to the university, say, here you go, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to spin it out? Do you want to take it into the university and offer it as a service from the university? Or what would you like? Would you like Kindling to keep on, or the shared TTO, to continue to support the project indefinitely because that's where it sits best at the moment? But we do that completely with the consent of the university. They still have complete control of their project. What we do is enable them to do the critical stage with the minimum of complexity from their side.
You mentioned Kindling Ventures. I'll pick you up on that then. Can you tell me who Kindling Ventures are in this project?
So Kindling Ventures is not me. It's a company which has been set up by Julian Yatka, Chris Fellingham, Frida Kozlowski, Eva Sikorova. So basically, they are the people who run the Shape Catalyst and the Arc Accelerator, which is the commercialisation training and development for universities across the UK. It's a thing that came out of the Aspect programme, which was a Connecting Capabilities Fund project, which was funded many years ago now, 2019, I think that was, and it ran for 5 years. Aspect is still going, but Kindling's developed out of that, as well as continuing to run the Shape Catalyst. They're also setting up programs in other countries across Europe, not least in Italy, doing similar stuff. But this is the next stage. So where they would be traditionally operating would be in that discover and launch stage of the development of a new idea. So what is your research? The ideation, what could you do with it, developing into a service or a product? And then you have that market validation, interacting with the market, how's it going to work? Then there's the problem which all of the ideas were hitting was all of the universities, unless they were the very biggest ones which had separate technology transfer offices, was saying, right, how do we do a contract to test this? And they were not able to do that. My background, I was at Oxford for 6.5 years. We in Oxford had a separate technology transfer office. And so a lot of the complexity in doing contracts, though still with oversight from the university, was far easier to do than it would have been had it been done from the central university. Whereas with smaller universities, all of that operation is within the university itself. We've got one project, for instance. It's sponsored by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and they are selling bricks. How does a university sell bricks?
I don't even know how to react to that other than to just laugh, because
it's a brilliant project. If you've got old buildings and you need to have particular bricks made out of a particular material, and will it be conform to grade 1 or grade 2 listing standard, is developed a process in order to be able to do this efficiently. And there is a lab where you can build prototype bricks. But then what happens next?
I like that example as well, because it does show that you really can't innovate in anything. You can make novel bricks for, as you say, for listed buildings that, there are very stringent requirements in the UK about what you can and cannot do with these buildings. I mean, you can't even just replace windows with new double pane windows. I hadn't even thought about the bricks, but it makes complete sense that that's also a challenge. Huh. Gavin, University of Arts London is the lead on this consortium. What does that entail for you or for the university?
Well, there are really two leads, actually. I should credit Mark for bringing together all these university parties and Kindling. So prior to this project, I did not know any of those parties. So the casting of the vision that became the grant application came from Mark. So Kindling, if you like, is the operational arm of the Shared Tech Transfer Office, so independent of any university. And Mark Mann Limited, he is the strategic brains and the vision behind bringing this consortium together. So in that sense, the lead has been Mark, which we're all extremely grateful for. But the grant itself needs to be held by one university, or in place between the universities, held by a university, and engaging all the other parties, the 6 universities, including UAL, and the 2 consultancies. And so that task has fallen to me and University of Arts as the consortium lead officially. So that's been an interesting process, getting a consortium agreement in place at very short notice and enabling this project to flow with all the different legal teams, the different universities. And we managed it only by being very late. So we didn't have a consortium agreement at the start. What we had was goodwill, which Mark had brought to this group. And we signed confidentiality agreements, which enabled us to proceed. And the consortium agreement was eventually signed somewhat near the end of the 6-month pilot, only recently. So that's one of the challenges, the patience required with everybody. Universities don't want to take risks for very obvious reasons. Research and teaching is their main focus. So an additional project like this doesn't have priority, and we don't necessarily have, in a small university, all the legal expertise needed to make this very efficient. So we managed it in that way. And I guess as we go forward, I think this is a very good model where one of us really focuses on institutional confidence across the parties, but also keeping the vision and the excitement between the parties. So Mark has done a lot more of the latter, and I've done a lot more of the former. Together, I think we've brought the project together at short notice and made it work. But the origins of the consortium are Mark's long-standing deep knowledge of these other universities and their pipelines, and knowing that both the personalities and the project flows were likely to be a fit.
A really mutually beneficial partnership. Mark, you've told me before that you never wanted to run a tech transfer office. You're shaking your head for people just listening to this.
Yeah, I'm not in the market, not doing it.
What's different about this then? Because this is essentially building a KTO.
That's exactly, you've answered my question. I'm building it, I'm not running it. Kindling is running it. I basically designed how it would work and put it together in terms of legal agreements with support from Mish Konderera, fantastic lawyers who've been able to help us sort of basically sketch out how all of it functions. The question was, I was trying to design something which would practically solve a lot of problems for a lot of universities. Having worked with all sorts of universities since I left Oxford and seeing all sorts of wonderful ideas just getting stuck, and I thought it's always been my motivation, is to getting really frustrated that these things can't get out. Everyone's trying their best. The people who are supporting them in the university are trying their best. It's just that all the rules and processes that are put down inside universities are there for very good reasons to make sure that the teaching and the research works. But in terms of being able to sell prototype services or products, it really doesn't work at all. So how does it work? What you do is a service agreement with the shared TTO. It's an overarching agreement, which is to say, this is how any project will be able to work with a shared TTO. And it says this is how the IP is going to be handled, if the academics are going to be working to support sale of services is going to work. There's some back-to-back consultancy agreements as part of it. And essentially what we've done is pre-baked in all of the plumbing that's required in order to deliver everything that's required in terms of a product and a service. And then what happens once that's signed is that for each and every project, not the head of the tech transfer office, but the nominated project manager can then throw one of their projects over the wall to the shared TTO. It works in the way like, let's say like a pipeline agreement would work with vaccines, like vaccine IP to a Spinout, for instance, where you'd say, okay, here's the IP that we've developed up until this point. Oh, you're going to need this as well. Chuck it over the wall to the Spinout company. It's licensed under the same terms. And this is essentially how it works. And then we have a schedule of work, which says, this is the stage that the project is at the moment. This is where we want to get it to at the end. And then we have a certain amount of time to deliver that schedule of work. When it's done, then we have a decision as to what is done with any profits, which might have been generated with it. Does that go back to the university, or does it stay there for business development, whatever it is that needs to be done? And then it gets sent back as and when everything is finished, including any new learnings, any new IP, anything that's developed as part of the project. Doesn't belong to Kindling, belongs to the university, all sent back.
That makes sense. Were you always going to use or basing this on the operating divisions model, or did you look at any others? Are there others?
So I didn't go to the Praxis RL conference in Blackpool last year. My colleague Chris did. And he saw a talk by Vincent Cool there, who's talking about his operating division. And basically he was taking a photograph of every slide and sending it back to me. And I said, yep, that's it. That's what we want. We want one of them.
Perfect.
But obviously it's got to be slightly different because it's not within a university. It's going to be shared between universities. But then the challenge became, how do we make it work so it's shared between a number of universities? And then lo and behold, a miracle comes along, which is shared TTO call from Research England, which we then said, right, okay, we've got something ready and made to go. Let's go.
And then Vincent buggered off to Dublin, I think it is. Yeah.
He did. And he was actually in Dublin when I convinced him to, because he was already living in Dublin, where I convinced him to join the project in the first place. Yeah.
Amazing. Really good guy, though, Vincent. I really like him.
He is.
Very knowledgeable. What were your expectations going into this pilot then? Did you have any ideas of what success might look like at the end?
For me, that was, if we can provide specialist expertise to help our academics, then there'd be a virtuous loop, both the assistance and the building of confidence and trust, which in turn would have more opportunity disclosures. So that was my hope for the project. And I'm pleased to say I'm already seeing that. I'm already seeing the process of application and the experience of the couple of projects from my university that are part of the program, part of the pilot, has helped them be confident about bringing me other opportunities, some of which might later go to their shared TTO or shared knowledge transfer office in the future. So that's one of the key benefits. We haven't got inexperienced new commercialisation managers getting their feet under the table in arts and humanities. No, instead we've got professionals, independent consultants, carefully selected to match the project and the academic lead, who have exactly the right experience to help them, and that makes a huge difference. It brings a credibility that can be lacking in an office where you've got your staff already and you're paying them, so you're going to deploy them against projects. In this case, you can be very selective about who and how much you apply and what the specialist expertise is. And I'm already finding that it's going down extremely well with academic staff. They're, after all, the customer at the end of the day.
So we've got social enterprise specialists, we've got services specialists, we've got product building specialists, manufacturing specialists. And me, I've ended up being the sort of the technical, here you go, negotiating licenses, spin out documents, and all those sorts of things with universities and founders who are doing it for the first time. And so, yeah, I've been providing sort of technical services as a part of this.
Was there something that surprised you during the pilot run?
One thing that surprised me was how useful it is to have the insight from all the parties into the spread of different types of arts and humanities ventures. So from my own university, the pipeline's small. From staff, I might have 15 opportunities, most of which are very, very early stage ideas, and only one or two that are mature. So I'm not seeing across that 15, I'm not seeing enough to really know what arts and humanities ventures that can make an impact at scale really look like. But when we put the shared TTO together with 6 universities, each picking their 2 best, if you like, best projects for this, you've then got a portfolio of ventures where you can see the kinds of ventures and how they make an impact. And that's extremely interesting for somebody who's not seen this before. And it enables us to tell a story from a portfolio perspective. It's everything from social sciences to immersive technologies, everything in between. So you get an understanding of the spread of the arts, and we get that partly by the joint events that we've had where we get to meet each other, share the stories, and really spend a bit of time understanding them. I think that understanding is really required. And it's neat to see how these ventures create their impacts, not always in a financial way, but the social purpose, the impact added in all sorts of different ways needs exemplification. So I think in having a shared TTO, we're going to be able to exemplify that by ventures that are at the point of spin out where they can really generate high impact.
Yeah, interesting to hear you talk about, but I guess it makes sense. You are the only person. You are the tech transfer office at the University of Arts London. That actually makes complete sense hearing you talk about it like that. Yeah.
For me, I've been pleasantly surprised by the response with both the people who work in the universities, in the sports side, but also the academics themselves. We had a training session in Birmingham about a month ago, and they were great. They really seemed to enjoy a good time and seemed to get an awful lot out of it. And it was genuinely, sometimes you go into these things and you go, are they actually learning something here? Or, is it worthwhile? But you've taught something hundreds of times, as I have, because you take people on the journey, through all the different projects. You wonder whether you're actually teaching them something that they don't already know, but then you remind yourselves that everybody has to learn it for the first time. And yet the response was really good, and people felt that they were learning stuff and pushing their ideas on, which felt great. It's really good to feel of youth.
Yeah. On a related note then, is there something that you would do differently next time around?
So I suppose, as a precursor to that, is what has not surprised you about this project, and what hasn't surprised me is how long it has taken for the universities to sign the contracts that has been necessary in order to make this work in the first place. And dare I say, it's exactly a demonstration of why this is needed in the first place. Because what we do is we solve everything with one contract. Yes, it's been painful to get that one contract done, but once it's done, everything can go seamlessly across from the universities to the shared TTO. So that is what hasn't surprised me. Now, would I have done anything differently? Well, there's nothing that I could have done differently within the constraints of the project, because we had a fixed time window of 6 months to get all of this done. And we knew that it was going to be a challenge to get everything done in the time legally, which is why we had to be very pragmatic about what risk we were going to take. And so if I was able to change anything, I would have loved to have been able to have more time and had spent the 6 months that we've had trying to get everything going with the contracts done first before we actually started the work. But we couldn't do it that way around. So we just had to do it all in one and hope that it all worked. And it has. That's what I would have done differently.
And I would second that, not just from the point of view of the administrative host, trying to manage that complex process, but also, because the operations here are delivered by consultants, Kindling and Mark Mann Limited, it's the consultants that are running time without being paid before the contracts are signed and any payment can be made. So normally, if a project is among universities, we just absorb that time. We just buffer the staff who are involved. They're being paid anyway. And then delay doesn't matter. But when we've got an independent tech transfer office or knowledge transfer office run by consultants, they actually carry all the risk and literally have to run costs at risk before we've signed the consortium agreement and paid them. So it would have been far better with this model to have had 6 months to get the agreement signed and then 6 months to do the pilot. But of course, we're mandated to start immediately. So we've managed it. But again, credit to Kindling and Mark Mann Limited for taking that risk.
Yeah. If anyone from Research England is listening, maybe they can heed that message. As a fellow freelancer, I definitely understand the waiting for payment obstacle that you face in choosing this career. Are there any lessons that you think would be useful for others if they wanted to replicate this project?
I think having the facility to allow ventures to trade, that's a critical element. And having set that up in Kindling now, which of course is the big investment of effort to set that up, but now it's set up, it can be used within Kindling, whether that's in a shared TTO or not, in theory. And so other universities could tap into that or replicate that model, and it would enable these ventures to trade, test markets, and build up an understanding of how interesting things are to customers before they commit. And I think that's critical for this point of spin-out, which is the focus of this grant. We want to create more spin-outs in arts and humanities. And here we are with that mechanism really helping that to happen.
It is the way to do it. The question is, how do you incentivize a shared knowledge transfer office to actually do the work and push the agenda on? How do you make sure that it just doesn't take the money and doesn't develop the project? Well, the only mechanism by which it's actually sustainable is for it to be funded, to be paid for by someone else. When you're doing prototyping and piloting, that's the risk phase. It's funded by grant or funded by either spare resource. There's no other way of doing it. I've gamed it. Believe me, I've tried.
No venture capital investor is going to come in at that point. And
No.
Why would they?
No, absolutely not. But what you can do is you can build sustainable businesses which employ people and grow and provide income and impact. And some of these things are doing, solving societal problems and making a social impact as well. But you have to have that funding at the very beginning. So in order to make it sustainable in the future, it's a good mechanism which actually is able to push them along. If they don't push them along, then the shared TTO should not be funded. If it's not demonstrating progress and it's the shared KTO's fault, then you don't pay them. But if you were to look at the results, so the money in terms of spend of time and effort by people within the university, how long it sits there and how much quicker things can go within the shared KTO, you would see the cost-benefit analysis would be heavily biased towards this model. I'll go even further, which is to say, I don't think it's even something that the big universities are going to be able to do very well, because when I was trying to do it in Oxford, I tried to run, which I did, I helped the education department to run a pilot program in Suffolk, where I was having to provide from the tech transfer office contracts to primary school teachers that they had to sign using our DocuSign licensing system. And I had to arrange where all the teachers were going to be, and I had to book a village hall somewhere so everybody could go in one place. It's not really the sort of thing that a technology transfer office is set up to do. You need to have a flexibility to bring in somebody separate to run something in a particular sector for which you would have no experience. In Oxford, what do they do? Drug discovery, medtech. Pathways are very similar. The characters might change between ventures, but you've got a pathway. You can support that. But are you selling to schools this week? Are you selling to building sites this week? Who knows, right? And this is what we can. You need a flexible mechanism to make it work.
I don't envy you having to wrangle a group of teachers into a village hall. That sounds like a nightmare. You've implied this, but is the plan to continue with the joint KTO? And if you do, where is the money coming from? Is it coming from the universities? Are you hoping that Research England will fund a long-running project?
That's the key hope, I think, is that Research England follow up on this with more grant funding based on us proving the model. I mean, it's been a huge investment to set up the model and test it in just 6 months. So it really pays off in the longer term. You know, we've accelerated some projects and got them to the point of trading, the point of spin out. But in order to really demonstrate the benefits long term, we need that to continue. Will the university partners all contribute to keep this going? That's one possibility. But again, we have the challenge of multiple decision-making trees in each university at a time of austerity. So that may be difficult. I think it would need each commercialisation office or company to find that money, and everybody's in a different circumstance. It may prove very difficult that way. The absolute minimum, which would be a shame if it ended here, the minimum would be that the mechanisms created and individual projects and universities can still tap into that. But so much is lost if we don't continue what we've started as a consortium and we don't have the critical mass, the knowledge sharing, and the excitement of doing something together that just creates an exemplification of what's possible for impact.
This has got international interest. People are looking at a project in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Norway. So we're going to Vilnius at the end of the month and I'm going to talk about the project there. They're exploring ways of doing something similar there. If I was to go to Research England, I would say to them, well, you have impact acceleration awards and accounts. And the question for them would be, well, how much bang are they getting for their buck? And one of the things that we deliberately built into the project was to have independent evaluation. So we wanted to ensure that we weren't marking our own homework, that somebody else was coming in and saying, well, has it actually made a difference? So that's something that we built into the project. With Shira, who works, I believe, alongside Thomas Ulrichsen, who work in impact evaluation of innovation programs from universities across the board. And she will be presenting her results over the course of the next couple of months.
Very interesting.
I don't know what she's going to say yet. She might say it's going to be rubbish. It is independent. I don't know what she's going to say.
I mean, from what you have told me today, it all seems to have gone relatively well and you're walking away with very positive impressions. So presumably her findings will also at least be positive, whatever the data will say. But if anecdotally it's worked, then the numbers probably also will, because you would have noticed that otherwise if it had gone that horribly wrong that the numbers don't add up.
The benefits are clear, I think, to all the universities. I mean, we've got the expert assistants for projects, carefully selected, quickly applied as independent consultants. It's low cost versus having a commercialisation manager employee on the books of the university. And then, the third important benefit is we've got that ability to test the market by trading. So those are the general benefits are very obvious and very clear, even from an early stage. And the numbers, the metrics that come out from Shira's evaluation will be interesting. I also have no idea what that will look like, of course, but it's going to be another dimension. Actually, a dimension in metrics that most tech transfer offices don't meet. This is far more stringent measurement than most offices would ever do. In that way, it's also a first, perhaps the other shared tech transfer offices. We're measuring things as never before, and it's going to be very interesting to show the value proposition.
The bigger tech transfer offices do break things down to quite granular levels because they capture all the data, particularly when you've got a patent, when you're moving it through all the different stages, you can actually track how much effort has gone into getting it through each stage, usually all in the database, and so you can work it out. I saw the value of it when I was building up the portfolio at Oxford many years ago, and my boss sat me down, he'd plugged Power BI into the database on Wellspring, got some data out and actually converted it into useful graphs. And he said, look, here's a line that says this is humanities and social sciences disclosures over the last 20 years. I said, look at this. I'm calling it the Mark Mann bump. But it was actually, you could actually see the difference. And it was at that point that I realized that actually the data is actually in there. And it's not actually that difficult to capture that data. And so what can you do with that data? How can you demonstrate what effort you're putting in to get a venture over the line? And then if you have a big enough sort of corpus of data, you can start getting some learnings. Are particular departments more difficult to work with than others? What difference does funding make? Is it down to the funding? What difference does time make of the academics? If you can track all of these different things, you actually get a picture as to what you could do to improve a process. And again, that's why we're wanting to give that data to Shearer and the team to say, look, this is it. This is what we've done. Some of it's going to be good, some of it's going to be bad. But at least we've got some data that you can work with to show what actually happens under the bonnet.
For a small university with an emerging new pipeline, we get the additional benefit then of applying the sophisticated metrics of a more mature office right from the start. We get to track and map our process from its very origins with data, which I think is very valuable.
Yeah. I'm definitely very excited to see the numbers as well when they are released. Or if they are not released, please send me a copy. It sounds like a really fascinating report.
It's all going to be published.
Part funded by Research England, so it'll be all public. That brings me to the end of my questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention before we say goodbye?
It was great fun. If there was ever confirmation that I don't want to run a technology transfer office, this was this project. But it was tremendous fun setting it up, and that's what I like doing. I like trying to do things for the first time and building it, but handing it over to people who want to run it and to do it. And what's really nice about this project is we've got a really good, capable team who are running the project now. And I just hope it can keep going in some way.
From my perspective, yeah, I agree with Mark. It has been great fun. And, another benefit has been, ready-made professional network across these 6 universities, network of support in this particular field where the arts and humanities tends not to get so much attention. So it's, especially for me as the sole employee, it's been nurturing to be part of a team and have that, not just the shared insights, but the camaraderie that comes with it and that having fun at work.
That's very true, actually. I hadn't even really thought about the, not quite loneliness, that's maybe too strong a word, but the not having the camaraderie in your office and how that it can lift your spirits, but also professionally nurturing. It's so much nicer to work with other people. I completely get that. Gavin, Mark, thank you so much for telling me more about the Stage project. It's been a lot of fun learning more about this, and I hope it will continue, and I will keep a close eye on it. Thank you very much to both of you.
Great pleasure.
Cheers.
The Next Leap is hosted and produced by me, Thierry Heles. Jenna Clark is the designer, Alex White is the composer, and Roxy is the production supervisor, and the best dog in the world. If you have any feedback or are interested in being a guest on a future episode, email me at thierry@thenextleap.is or message me on LinkedIn. And if you've learned something useful today, make sure to share the podcast with your colleagues and post about it on social media. That is the best way to help the show grow and to make sure I can keep bringing you great conversations like today. Next week, we are heading to Hungary. Until then, thank you for listening, or as we say back home in Luxembourg, merci, dass ihr gelauscht habt.